Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. This week we are exploring a bit together about some of the other gods who are mentioned by name in the Bible. These gods were worshipped by Canaanite peoples and the other nations around Israel, and it would be easy for us to think that attention for these gods has long since faded away. But that would not be true. There is a religion in our world today called Wiccan, which is associated with what we might call witchcraft. In modern Wiccan observance, one of their gods is Astarte, who is mentioned at least 9 times in the Bible. She isn't often mentioned in terms of who people believed she was and what she stood for, but through other sources besides the Bible, we do know some things. Astarte was worshipped mostly by the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, although worship of her eventually spread even to Syria. Her sphere of influence was that she was the goddess of war, sexuality, royal power, beauty, healing, and hunting. All of these were important things in the ancient world, and more recent scholarship seems to indicate that she was not a fertility goddess, thus downplaying her influence in sexuality and instead highlighting her importance for war. Images and idols of her most often depict her on horseback or on a chariot wielding weapons as if going to war. She is most often symbolized as a lion, again somewhat warlike in her image. Now, frankly, most of the times Astarte is mentioned in the Bible is when someone is calling the people of Israel back to true worship in God. They are often urged to put away their false gods and stone idols. It's usually said like this: "Put away your Baals and Astartes and return to God." There are, however, a couple of places in the Bible where Astarte takes on a bit more of a prominent role. In 1 Samuel, Samuel repeatedly calls on the people to put away their Astartes and return to God, but nevertheless worship of Astarte persisted. She was certainly one of the gods the Philistines worshipped, and at the end of 1 Samuel, King Saul has led Israel out in battle against the Philistines, and the Philistines won the day, and Saul was killed. After the battle, as the Philistines wandered the battlefield, they found the body of King Saul, and they stripped him of his armor and placed it in the temple of Astarte. It would seem they believed that Astarte had given them the victory, and they were honoring her with a sign of that victory. A second and far more troubling story involves King Solomon. Solomon, you might remember, was David's son and followed him on the throne. It was Solomon whom God visited in a dream and offered him anything he wished. And instead of asking for wealth or long life or victory over enemies, Solomon asked for wisdom to rule the people. This pleased God, so God gave him the wisdom and all those other things too. Solomon is described as the wisest person who ever lived, and there are even stories of people like the Queen of Sheba who came great distances to experience and see the wisdom of Solomon. Unfortunately, in his old age, he departed from that wisdom, which is to say, he departed from faithfulness to God alone. Before we look at that specifically, we need to remember that in those days, kings tended to have many wives. The way treaties were done between nations was that the two nations would cement the arrangement of peace between them by having the daughter of one king marry the other king. So there would be a wife for every treaty you had. Solomon is said to have had 700 wives, plus 300 concubines. You might have anticipated the problem already. These wives, having come from differing countries, brought their gods along with them. Just because they married Solomon didn't mean that they necessarily forsook the gods they had worshipped all their lives. The question becomes, would they have any influence on Solomon? In 1 Kings 11 we read, "For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. For Solomon followed Astarte, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not completely follow the Lord as his father David had done." I often worry about how easily our hearts are turned away after other gods. It has been said by many that the thing that is most important to you, the thing that your heart most desires, that is your God. Any short list of things like that might include power, respect, wealth, comfort, and many, many other things that we devote much time and energy to having. And to make matters worse, we don't often examine ourselves to consider how these other gods have wormed their way into our lives and how they turn us away from true worship of our true God. Just as Astarte still has some sway for some in our society, maybe we should let Samuel's words hold sway for us too. Put away your Baals and Astartes, and return to the Lord your God. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.